Hello, everyone. Welcome to Auras VTH. And today I'm super excited to be hosting a very special guest. We have our candidate for district attorney here in Los Angeles, George Gascon. And I can hear the echo in the background, but we'll fix that in a minute. I hope that everybody's having a wonderful Thursday. The reason why I started doing these live streams is because I wanted to just bring more information and just educate all of us and learn about topics that are important to us and that are affecting us every day. So for some of us, it's very familiar to meet other candidates and know who they are and understand what their values and their goals are and what they want to do for our community. But for a lot of us, maybe not so possible. So I'm excited to have George join us today. George, welcome. So let me just bring him out here. Hi, George.
Hi, Aura, how are you?
I'm doing great. I just want to ask you to lower the volume of your phone all the way so we don't hear the echo.
It's all the way down.
Yeah, it's all the way down.
Ah,
I'm going to try something, Aura.
beautiful. Putting my headset on. Try to figure this out.
I think, can you check there?
How's that? Is that any better?
It sounds better for me.
Okay.
No, I still hear an echo, but let me just figure it out if I can just lower this whole thing here. Bear with us, guys. You always bear with me. There you go. Is this better? It's better on my maybe lower your computer volume also all the way.
All the way?
Sure.
All the way, yeah. Just like
Like mute?
almost.
Okay, hold on. There?
I think it's perfect now. Okay, it's a little echo, but I think we can deal with it.
Yeah, I think we still have the problem with the sound.
It's
Yeah.
all the way down. I don't know what's wrong. Because it's all the way down and it's muted.
Okay.
Well, George, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aura. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you doing?
You know what? Doing well. Obviously dealing with the social distancing and the quarantine process, but working really hard on the campaign. Meeting a lot of voters, meeting a lot of supporters, and spending a lot of time in front of Zoom. You know, we get up in the morning with a computer and we go to bed at night with a computer on.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how has COVID-19 impacted you personally and also your campaign?
And you know what? I hang on for a second, Laura. I'm sorry. We're having a little bit of a difficulty here. Nope, not that.
Well,
Okay.
for those of you that are watching while we figured out the sound and the feedback that we're receiving, I want to just invite you to ask your questions. If you are in any of my social media platforms, you can just simply ask a question on the comment box. If you are on Instagram, you know what to do. Go to the comment box, and next to the comment box, there is a symbol of question mark, and you can post your questions there. And I think I already have some questions that people have posted before.
My goodness.
But, bear with us. Okay, I think it sounds good, maybe.
A little better, yeah. We still got a little echo. I think we're having a hard time with the Instagram piece of it, but
Yeah. I just lowered all the volume for everything, and I think it works perfect.
good.
There you go. Well, I think while we figured out the sound situation, one of the questions that I often get from people is, what does the district attorney do?
Yeah, so great question. So to begin with, the DA is the chief law enforcement officer for the county. So he or she basically sets the tone how the criminal justice system is going to work in the county. They have a tremendous amount of influence in how police will do their work, just by the way that they are doing their work, what kind of cases they're willing to prosecute, how they're going to prosecute the cases, how do they hold police accountable, how do they deal with the courts, what type of penalties do they seek, how do you deal with public corruption, how do you deal with environmental issues. So the district attorney actually is involved in a lot of areas, and through their policies, frankly, they have a tremendous social impact in our community, and they also have a tremendous economic impact, way beyond their budget, right? The level of incarceration, whether you seek the death penalty or not, how you deal with public corruption, all those things could really mount up in the economic and social costs, whether you attend to issues of environmental justice, are you holding environmental polluters accountable or not, which can have a tremendous impact in our health system and obviously our well-being countywide. So the district attorney is one of the most influential elected officials in any county. Now, LA County is even more important because it's the largest county in the country. We're home to 10.5 million people. There's no other DA's office that is this large. So the policies that are set by the district attorney in LA County, not only do they impact the entire state, but they also have a national impact.
Incredible. You touch upon a few issues that are dear to my heart personally. Of course, the environment is very dear to my heart, and a lot of the people that watch my shows, they know that my commitment to protect our environment, to get LA to 100% renewables, and just in general environmental justice. But I think other point that you're making is our prison population and what happens to people, like for example, the death penalty, which is something that is a very serious issue, or even more policies around people that are in isolation, or the prison population that are in isolation. So what is your vision in terms of your campaign to bring to Los Angeles? As you said, we're the largest county in the country. We're one of the most populated jail systems in the country as well. What is your vision that you want to bring forward to our, to the work that you're bringing?
Sure. So my goal is to do several things. I have a long history of striking a balance between community safety and reforming the criminal justice system. My goal, if I were to be elected, is to make sure that we begin to increase safety in our community, but also decrease the footprint of the criminal justice system. So lower the level of incarceration, ensure that the mentally ill are diverted away from the criminal justice system and they're put in places where they're going to get better. Ensure that we deal with our juveniles in a way that is in line with their age and their level of maturity and, modern science concerning brain development.
Mm-hmm.
When you start doing all those things, what you do is not only are you lowering the cost of the criminal justice system in terms of the social impact to our community, but you're improving the quality of life for people. At the same time, you're lowering the economic impact of your work. And that in turn can be used to reinvest funding that is currently being spent in jails and prisons and police and prosecutors into social services and housing and education and other things that are going to, over the long time, are going to create a more livable, more sustainable community, that when we're spending this money incarcerating and, over policing our community.
Yeah. So in terms of mass incarceration, or just even the school prison pipeline, which is a conversation that in LA has been very alive for the past couple of years. In fact, some of the advocates on this space have advocated to not build another jail, but actually to build a mental health facility that can in-house homeless and other folks. especially now with COVID-19, and somebody asked me this yesterday to ask you today, in terms of COVID-19 and with the population also being at risk if maybe the virus getting to a jail and maybe, is spreading. What do you think we need to do in terms of offenders that maybe are not non-violent offenders or such? Are you in support of letting some of this population go so that they're not affected by COVID-19? And if not, or if yes, how would you treat this situation? Because I think that this is definitely something that people want to know.
Of course, look, I'll give you an actual example. The Sheriff Department provided the DA's office several weeks ago a list of 2,100 people that were non-serious, non-violent offenders who qualified to be released immediately, so the DA could review the cases and put those people out, which would reduce jail population further. It would reduce the likelihood of people becoming infected and they in turn infecting other people.
Mm-hmm.
The DA's office took this list and they're doing about 20 cases per day. So in now almost 3 weeks, they have released a little over, maybe around 200 people. So that means that there is about 1,800 or 1,900 people roughly that even the Sheriff Department saying these people should be released, but I want you, DA, to take a look at it. We know that our prison population and our jail population have always been way over capacity. We know that the county jail has a capacity of around 12,000 people, the entire system, and we've had around 17,000 every day. Mm-hmm. Now, that has been lowered to somewhere around 11,000 to 12,000 now, but you have to think about it. That's still just capacity. So when you're talking about capacity in the jail system, you don't have the ability to provide for social distancing. You don't have the ability to provide for the hygiene that CDC and other medical experts are talking about. You have people that are basically on top of each other, and when they're ill, they're passing that on to others. And then what often is not people don't realize is that the jail population is rotating every day. So people are coming and people are going every day. Mm-hmm. And what you have then is you have hundreds of people coming out every day. Many of them may be infected with the virus. They take it to their community. They take it to their neighbors, their family members, and they in turn continue to propagate this very deadly virus. These people need to be released. Those that can be released safely should be released very, very quickly. There is no excuse for us to continue to drag our feet. Another thing is that we have to really continuously evaluate the value of filing low-level cases today, bringing them into the courtroom and having the interaction that puts so many people at risk when these cases are not necessarily providing or presenting a public safety risk. And the DA has 1 year to file those cases so they can bring them back later on. There are also people that are elderly inside the jail system. And we know that the elderly they're even more vulnerable than others. So not only are they more likely to become infected and pass it on to others, but they themselves may, their life may be at risk. And again, you're talking about huge economic costs to maintaining the population in this very complicated pandemic environment. So what you're doing is you're escalating the cost, you're escalating the risk, and you're not necessarily making the community any safer.
Right. So what are some of the other options in terms of protecting the prison population, while they're incarcerated? Like, is there anything else that we can do to make sure that they not get, infected? I mean, I can imagine if one person gets infected, it will be catastrophic for a group of people that live basically all together. So what else can we do to protect them, the current incarcerated, or what would you do if you were already the DA?
Yeah, the first thing that we have to do is we need to continue to thin out the population, right? So everybody that does not present a public safety risk of violence to anyone should be released. And, depending on the level of comfort that we have, they may be electronically monitored, they may be required to call once a day to probation or once a week, or they may just simply be let go and, they'll be given a day to come back again. Once we start reducing the jail population to a place where then the sheriff can start providing more space to create social distancing and make sure that people are having the protective equipment that they need, whether we're talking about masks, we're talking about gloves, we're talking about hygiene, right? I mean, it's even hard to, a lot of people don't realize, but it's not like you can find soap readily available within the jail system. You don't have sanitizer. All the things that we take for granted are often not available to the jail population. So you're congregating people in very close quarters. They don't have the capacity to have the distance. They don't have the capacity to provide each other with the protecting equipment that they need. And they continue to become not only themselves, putting themselves at risk, but everybody else. So we have to reduce the population to the highest level possible without compromising public safety. We haven't quite done that yet. So we continue to do that. We need to also make sure that we're not putting new people into the system that are not a public safety risk, right? We can defer those cases. It doesn't mean that we forget about them, but you can defer them until we create capacity, until we figure things out. The bottom line is that we have to be a leader. The DA has to be a leader, has to be an active participant in this process of reducing jail population. What we have seen out of the DA's office at the moment is not leadership, but actually follower, being very passive, at the same time taking a very detrimental approach to the work, actually looking for ways to keep people in custody as opposed to releasing people, and looking for ways to reduce the likelihood that people are going to be released quickly.
And that's really amazing to me to see this unfold, that we're in 2020 where we have more technology, we have forensics, and we have police have body cameras. There's so many ways for us to track what's going on in real time. It's almost tough to not see it, in fact. So it's hard to see this the DA office now modernizing with the times and trying to mitigate some of these needs that also the broader residents want to see change as well. I mean, we have a huge discrepancy in the amount of people that go through our jail system that are people of color, Black people and Latinos, versus other people. And the reality is that we have a system that has been inherited racist and a system of inequality that is really affecting some people more than others. This is a really hard job. Why do you want to be a DA? What inspired you? What was the turning point in your life that you decided to become a DA? Because I know that this is not your first run. You've done it before.
Right.
So why DA?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, look, very quickly, I grew up here in the county. I grew up in a very poor neighborhood. I grew up in Cudahy. My parents were, factory workers. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment. I slept on a sofa in the living room. I dropped out of high school. I had, I had a lot of issues growing up that are not different from what many kids and many other adults that we deal with on a daily basis are. And it's people like me, right, that have been so negatively impacted by the criminal justice system for so many years. Obviously, when you talk about the African-American experience, you have the legacy of slavery that continues to be weighing down. Much of policing today, in many ways, it still reflects the impact of slavery and the origins of policing in many parts of this country today. And I know that people get very uncomfortable when we talk about slavery and we talk about racism in the system, but the reality is there. And you cannot fix a problem unless you face it. For me, it's been a passion for years. I not only was a police officer in LA PD, rose through the ranks to become an assistant chief, but I was also a chief of police in Mesa, Arizona, where I fought the Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio and his racist, anti-immigrant approaches to the work. I went to Congress. I was one of the first people to lodge a complaint against him with the Justice Department. I was run out of town. I went to San Francisco. I became the chief of police there, and later the district attorney for 2 terms. I got elected twice, and I did so on a very progressive platform, but at the same time, we were providing for public safety. So during the time I was DA, we saw significant reductions in violent crime in San Francisco, at the same time that we decarcerated at levels that no other urban jail had. We maintained anywhere from a third to almost 40% vacancy rates every day.
Mm-hmm.
By comparison, LA County incarcerated 4 times the rate that we did in San Francisco, and violent crime during the current administration has gone up by 30%. So I've been able to show that you can lower crime and you can lower the impact of the criminal justice system in all communities, but especially communities of color. My goal in being DA here would be to bring some of that same brand of work, but obviously make it LA specific, be able to work with local communities to make sure that we lower the level of incarceration, that we no longer continue to be the largest incarcerator people in this country, that we get rid of the death penalty, that we stop prosecuting juveniles as adults, that we start holding people accountable, especially the powerful, whether it's sexual assault or environmental polluters. So many parts of our county, especially when we're talking about communities of color, are being impacted one generation after another by fossil fuels and the fossil fuel industry and the waste that goes on with that. We know that we have kids that have chronic health problems that are driven by the pollution that this county has continued to allow one decade after another. And a lot of people don't realize that this attorney actually has a role to play in this. And you have a role to improve the quality of life of so many people that are being impacted, sometimes even without seeing it, right? We got young kids that are growing up around some of these facilities. They're breathing air that is unhealthy. And often we see communities all of a sudden beginning to show symptoms of some types of cancer or respiratory problems that then years later we realize, well, that is connected to what was going on in this particular industry or this particular plant or this particular facility.
Yeah.
That is stuff that the district attorney needs to care about and needs to put attention to it, because that's also part of making our community safer.
And it's incredible that you're speaking about this, because as someone that has been working on the environmental justice space for so long, this is the first time I hear any DA of any kind in my life talk about environmental racism and environmental impacts and how the DA can help change that. I mean, this definitely, I'm having an aha moment myself. When we have polluters, and especially with this $3 trillion bailout that our government just gave corporations, when the fossil fuel industry got billions of dollars to stay afloat, and regular everyday people got $1,200 check that some people got and some people didn't get. Some of the conversation around, especially now with COVID, is about, is the crime gonna increase? Half of Americans are receiving unemployment of some kind. So my question to you is, like, how do we ensure, or like how your office also ensures that the community feels safe even in these moments where we're all at home? And I have heard a few of my friends saying, I'm going to get a gun because I feel like things are going to get really unbearable and out of control in the future. So what are some of the things that the DA office can do to protect, the community as a whole?
I think there's several things that we need to, first of all, look at the facts and then understand there's a lot of urban legends out there. Crime is at a lowest level it has been in generations, and crime has actually decreased during this period of time. So even though that we have released unprecedented numbers of people, both from our county jail and our prison system, our crime hasn't gone up. And it's important to realize that there is something about the fact that we have released so many people, about a third of our jail population, and crime in the county is still going down, which means that probably those people should not have been in jail in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
So let's first of all kind of look at the fact. Crime is not going up. Repeat offenders, even, you hear sometimes a horror story of, the one person that got arrested 3 times that were released with 0 bail. But look, those are the minority of the cases. Why not look at the great majority of the people that are getting out, they're staying home, they're spending time with their families, and they're doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I think is just really important to look also is I think it's good to learn from history too. In almost every time that we've had a major economic crisis, going back to the Great Depression, actually crime has gone down.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when we go through this big economic downturns, it doesn't necessarily translate in crime going up. However, there's no question that also as a community and as a country and as a county, we have to make sure that we're providing a safety net for those that are most vulnerable. We have to make sure that we don't increase our homeless population. In fact, we have to make sure that we reduce the size of our homeless population, and we're trying to do so, even if it's renting a low-price hotel room. We have to make sure that those benefits that people qualify for, that they get the assistance that they need in order to get it. We have to make sure that we are being a good neighbor, that we're being a good family member, that we're working with one another to make sure that those that are more vulnerable and those that are less fortunate are provided with as much of a safety net as we can. But the concept that crime is going to go up really is unlikely. Number one, it's not bared by the facts, and we now have been in this lockdown for 2 months plus, and we have released a lot of people from jail, right? So I think that what we need to do is we need to take a deep breath. We need to look around us. We need to look about ways that we can be perhaps a better neighbor, a better family member. Those of us that are fortunate enough maybe to help others to do so, those that need help, make sure that we know who they are and try to provide the assistance that we can. And let's try to build community and not more guns. We don't need any more guns in our community.
And and before I go to the questions, I have a lot of questions here on Instagram and Facebook. There's a lot of people asking too. I want to say I appreciate your approach to your calling to more community. And in LA, we see now something really exciting, which is a lot of mutual aids. Like I have some resources, you have resources. Right. We work together to get these resources and share them and make sure that we protect each other. And I encourage everyone, if you have a mutual aid near you, please join and help your community do that. And if you don't have a mutual aid, maybe you can start one. And if not, you can join mine. I have my own mutual aid where I have been running, my groups, and we give PPA, and it's refreshing to hear a DA talking about building more community and less guns, which is something that we don't really hear too much. But I want to start with a question that I'm getting on Instagram, which is around police brutality. And I think also in the comments on Facebook, there is a comment around police brutality. And it has been the common threat, especially around African Americans, the Black community, and the Latino community. What are some steps that you see that you can do in order to mitigate this issue of police brutality, which it seems is much in the culture of the police system?
Sure. So look, a perfect example is we just had a recent incident in Boyle Heights, right? I think most people have seen the video. We saw a police officer completely out of control, just pummeling this individual. And we saw another police officer standing by and not interfering. And none of this would have become public, but for somebody taking a video and putting the video out on social media. And then, of course, we now know. I immediately made a public statement. I called on DA to look at this case very seriously. In my opinion, and based on many years of experience reviewing police use of force, prosecuting police officers for criminal conduct, that this is a case that needs to be prosecuted. I understand that, people say, well, the investigation has to go through. But the problem is sometimes you have to gather a lot of facts, and other times you have so much in front of you. You have a video that is so clear,
right,
where you have a person that is not fighting, a person that is completely trying to protect himself, and the officer is striking this individual multiple times. And, regardless of whatever this person said earlier or anything that happened, the reality is what you're seeing in front of you is you're seeing unjustified use of force. And I called upon the DA to call it out, and she wouldn't. And it wasn't until she got a lot of public pressure, after I had, made a lot of noise, Then she came out and said, well, this is a concerning case. The chief of police ought to really say it's concerning, right? And then she goes to the LA Times and she starts to explain what the law is around use of force and how DAs have to look at a use of force case by police. And she even misstates the law, which worries me, because if she has that much of a misunderstanding of the law, I have to wonder whether it's because she actually doesn't understand the law, which is scary, or because police unions are giving her over $2 million to run against me and to make sure that she continues to look the other way as she has in other cases. So it is this kind of leadership that we need to have. We need to protect and we need to work with good officers. And sometimes we recognize that police is going to have to use force because they're forced to in order to protect their life of others. But in those incidents where they use unnecessary and excessive force that is criminal, they need to be held accountable. And the example that I gave a group of people the other day, how important the DA can set the tone in, one way or the other. Look, when we're driving down the freeway, we generally stay within the speed limit because we are worried that the CHP is going to stop us and we're going to get a ticket, right? If there were no CHP, everybody would be, no consequences. We'd all be driving a lot faster. Well, policing is no different, right? The CHP for the police is the DA. And if the people in the police department do not feel there will be any consequences for bad behavior, then, they're going to start behaving accordingly. And what we have seen in this county is we have seen a DA that consistently looks the other way. Yeah. And that is why the level of excessive force in this county is so out of proportion with even counties like San Francisco. And again, I'm not talking about raw numbers. I'm talking about proportionality. If the DA is not being the gatekeeper, we're going to have the problems that we have.
And I think some of the comments, people are really resonating with what you're saying. It's like, why do we take so long to take action when it comes to police brutality? And for those of you that have not been maybe following this race, your primary was on March 3rd. And the current DA is, her name is Jackie Lacey. And she's been quite a controversial character because a lot of people feel like she's not really stepping up to protect people. That she is, as I'm putting in the comments here, really being supported by certain, interest groups that basically are letting her go, letting her off the hook on a lot of the things that she should be doing to protect us. Right. The second thing is that she won last time. She went through, she got elected with no issues. And this time around you came, and for the first time she was challenged. And now she's forced into a runoff. In November, there's going to be your election again, like the DS election. And we have an opportunity to elect someone that is going to align with our values. And also with somebody that has a new vision for what LA needs. And somebody that is just going to be on our corner. And I think that the majority of residents, and if you resonate with this, you can put a heart on the comments, a like, a thumbs up, whatever you guys want. But I mean, we want to feel like we have somebody in our corner. I want to feel as a woman of color that I'm not going to be stopped by the police in the middle of the night because I'm being confused by a prostitute or by something else. That I can just be a regular human being, like I hate to say, like a lot of like white people do. And that we are treated equally, where there's communities where the majority of people are people of color, just like where there's communities where the majority of people are white and they're not being harassed and hustled and stopped for anything, every little thing, or just for driving, just for being a person of color. So this election is super important, guys. And I encourage you to stay informed. We're having a conversation with George Gascon. He is running for the DA position, for the district attorney position here in Los Angeles, which earlier he was sharing with us that they do actually so much more than I didn't even know that they prosecute EJ, environmental justice issues, for example. But I'm getting a lot of questions around, police brutality. But I wanted to bring another question that somebody asked earlier, which is around the electoral helping change the justice system. So and into college graduates. So for example, in this question particularly, how can the electoral help the DA turn those under justice system into college graduates? So we actually reform people, right? technical skill house business owners? Do you see a path to these kinds of alternatives if we get the electorate behind funding those kinds of programs?
I think there's two things. Look, number one, I think is we start reducing the footprint of the criminal justice system by reducing incarceration. There will be millions, quite frankly, billions of dollars that could be saved over time. And that money could be reinvested into education, into reentry programs, into social welfare, into health and education. So there are a lot of things that can occur just with the money that we have now. The other thing is that as you reduce the level of criminalization, you then create a new level of people that will become employable, that they themselves are going to become productive people. They're going to pay taxes. They're going to be contributing to the community as opposed to being, unfortunately, a cost to the community because they're incarcerated. So even just sort of dialing down the way that we do our work, reducing the over-policing in communities of color, not criminalizing the poor, and reinvesting some of that money into social welfare programs, mental health, education, that by itself not only will reduce crime over a period of time, but it actually creates the capacity to reinvest money, shift money from one bucket, the prison, the jails, the prosecutors, and the police bucket, to the bucket of mental health professionals, schools, social services, parks and recreation, all the other things that then start building blocks and reducing the likelihood that people will be criminalized. Look, even homelessness. One of the contributors to homelessness in this county is our over-incarceration. You know, the person that run for both the LA City and LA County, homeless outreach, he was quoted telling the New York Times once that one of the greater predictors of homelessness was incarceration, right? People that become incarcerated are very likely to become homeless when they get out.
And with that also education. If you don't have a good education.
Yeah. But even in a short period of time, or look, you're driving without a license because you're undocumented, okay? Mm-hmm. And I know that in California you could get a license, but a lot of people won't.
Don't do it.
They're fearful that will become a database that could be used to give them to ICE or whatever is going to cause their deportation. But otherwise, you're a working family person, you're taking your kids to school, you're doing all the right things. You get stopped for a minor violation, sometimes, quite frankly, just purely for racial profiling, okay? Driving while brown now, okay? You don't have a license, your car gets impounded. In this county, you get prosecuted. Sometimes you go to jail for 2 or 3 days, right? By the time you come back, you don't have a card, you lost your job because you missed work and there were other people that took your job. At the end of the month, you cannot pay the rent. Next thing you know, you're being evicted and now you and your family are homeless. That happens in this county every single day. We have to stop doing this kind of things that not only criminalize the poor, but in the long run, increase our homelessness, increases, the poverty levels. It just has such a negative impact in almost every aspect of life. And by the way, these things not only impact the poor, they impact everybody, okay? They impact everybody. When you're talking about the levels of homelessness that we have, business people, right? You come in the morning to open the doors of your business and you have somebody sleeping in front of your place, maybe defecating because they don't have a place to do it, right? Obviously, that doesn't make you very happy, but guess what? Where is that person going to go?
Yeah.
Right?
And our jail system has become like the biggest mental facility of all times. Like we don't invest, like it's hard sometimes for people to understand that homelessness, a lot of our homeless are a lot of our unsheltered people end up there because of mental illness, as you explained. A lot of people also end up there because they can't pay the rent. It's so expensive to live in LA. A lot of people start by living in their cars, then they pitch a tent, and then they end up on the streets. Yeah. The homeless community is not homogeneous. It's not all of them are the same. And I feel like our justice system treats everyone the same, and we're not all the same.
Well, and you know what? That in some ways it does, and in other ways it discriminates horribly, right? To the poor, to the persons of color, to people that could be dealt with in a very different way. Look, I mean, we have thousands of kids in the LA Unified School District that are homeless, right? So that, I mean, there are families that are homeless. We have people that are actually working, but they're working in jobs that they cannot afford to pay the rent. So they're, you know, they're either couch surfing with their family members or neighbors, or sometimes they're actually sleeping out on the street or sleeping in the car. So the issue of homelessness in this county is huge. And while there's no question that many other factors that are unrelated to the criminal justice system, the one thing that we have to make sure is that the criminal justice system doesn't contribute and creates more problems that we already have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so one of the questions that I see in both of the chats coming in and out is this idea of use of force, and particularly I see this question here. Why do you think it's taking our DA so much time to prosecute crimes when we have police using force? And this just last week, a video went viral when we saw one of our LA cops beating down a gentleman in front of us, in front of a church. And so what does it take for a DA to prosecute this type of crimes? And how is it that the police gets away with some I don't want to generalize, because I have met policemen that have helped me before when I had been stranded or when I have need their help. But when it comes to having them, like, seeing them beating other people with no clear reason, and with the other person unable to defend themselves, or caught on video planting evidence to citizens, why do you think we have a DA that doesn't want to prosecute these people when they're clearly breaking the law and nobody's above the law?
Yes. Well, I think, you know, the why is very straightforward, right? I think all you have to do is follow the money. You just got to look at the primary election. The Los Angeles Police Union and the Association of Deputy Sheriff combined put about $2.1 million to support Jackie Lacey. Now, why would they give her that much money? It's very obvious. They're basically paying for someone that is going to be looking the other way sometimes when they have members of the organization that are committing criminal behavior. And look, I want to make it very clear. The large majority of police officers do an incredible job protecting us.
Absolutely.
They do it right every day, and they have thousands and hundreds of thousands of contact with their community without ever using force. That is not the problem. The problem is that the people that do not need to be held accountable, because when they're not held accountable, then policing and the entire system loses their moral authority. And the case in Boyle Heights, or the case 5 years ago at Venice Beach, when you saw that officer basically executing the homeless person, or the case involving the senior women in the freeway where the CHP officers start pummeling her, right? These are the cases where prosecution is called for. And in fact, in the case of Venice Beach, the chief of police asked the DA to file charges, which is very unusual, and she declined. The case in Boyle Heights is a case that cried for her to come out immediately and say, you know what we're seeing is not acceptable, and we're gonna take over the investigation. If the police department doesn't do it quickly enough, we can do it. She has the capacity, by the way, to independently investigate and move forward the case. Now, I'm not saying actually the police is not doing their job here. I think the chief of police has been very transparent, and I commend him for coming out and showing all the video, all the body-worn camera. He did not have to do that as quickly as he did, and I commend him for that, right? But independent of that, the DA needs to stand up and say what is going to be acceptable. And there's no reason for her to be waiting a great deal of time, because the behavior in this particular case, just on the video alone, is extremely clear, regardless of what happened before. And by the way, we now know that what happened before also did not justify the use of force. But even if there was something else that happened before, you have to look at a point in time. And at that moment, that individual was not resisting arrest. That individual was not hurting the officer. That individual was not posing a threat. And this officer was beating him.
Yeah.
Okay, so that itself was enough. But we actually now know that even all the entire transaction leading up to this, again, there was absolutely no reason for this use of force. I don't care what any witness says. You can have somebody come in and say that, you know, there was a pink elephant coming over the officer. You know, that flies in the face of reality, right? If let me put it another way. If a person off the street would have come in and punched an officer the way that this officer is punching this person, the DA would be filing a case immediately without waiting for any witnesses or anything. That case would be filed the next day, right? That person would have been arrested that moment, and the case would have been filed within 24, 48 hours as soon as they got arrested. We need to make sure the police officer are treated the same way as anybody else.
And that's the strategy. And a lot of people are saying that in the comments. Why don't they? I mean, there should be also a policy violation against cops as well. Because, you know, well, one thing that I want to dive in, and like, I can't believe like time has passed so fast talking to you. Thank you so much. We're talking to George Gascon. He is a candidate for the district attorney position here in Los Angeles. We've been talking a lot about different topics, and the next thing that I wanted to ask you is training around the police training, and what to do when we have a police force that is being trained to kill and to execute, and how can we graduate? How can we evolve to something that is less, you know, practicing target to kill somebody, but maybe just to break their leg or you know, or to just, I mean, something that some people here in the comments were talking about, you know, that they get 90% of their training is physical. That why, for example, we don't use things like mindfulness and meditation to the police, which I think it might be a far out for some people to think that, but maybe that's what we need. You know, because I mean, I understand that not everybody has the best intentions when they go out there. I don't definitely go out there to commit a crime. And there's a lot of people also that commit crimes because there's a lineage of history where they have been, you know, also part of the chain of violence in their home. They maybe didn't. I mean, there are 1,000 reasons, environmental reasons, you know, for your family. But what are we going to do with training, and how can we evolve?
Yeah, and look, it's a complicated question, because I think that part of the problem is that American policing has evolved from, you know, decades with a heavy reliance on use of firearms and the use of force, right? And then you add to that the complexity of race in this country, and certainly, as I mentioned earlier, slavery, just so many other things, right? I believe that the problem is that we need to really, probably beyond just looking at current training, which I think the LAPD, by the way, does a very good job of training under the current framework that police train people. But I think
which is what? Explain to us a little bit of what's the framework. Maybe some people know, maybe some people have
I think that the framework of police training is still very heavily in a militarized form. I think that there is a tremendous premium that is placed on physical fitness. I think there's tremendous premium that is placed on, you know, learning how to use a firearm well. You know, to be fair, you can't train people to shoot people in the leg and the arm. That's not, you know, anybody that's fired, especially a handgun, knows that, you know, is very difficult, especially under stress, and moving people is very hard. You know, you can only teach to hit the center mass. But the question becomes more basic is, why do we rely so much on the use of firearms, right? There are other countries in the world where police use a fraction of the force. There is not as heavy as an emphasis in the use of firearms. And I understand some people here are going to push back and say, yeah, but we have a gun culture in this country. I get that. But even within the gun culture, there is ways to deal with many problems that does not require a gun. But when the gun becomes such an essential part of your training, and where force becomes such a central part of your training, then human reaction will go to their training in a way that deals with this. We would have to really kind of reset the button, if you will. Even the type of people that we recruit to be police officers, there has to be a whole shifting of the culture,
rethinking
in this country, which goes beyond just simple training. So I think what is realistic is that good enforcement of the current rules as to when force can be used by the district attorney can have a tremendous impact on the level of force that is going to be used just simply by holding people accountable. I think that there are certain things you can do that will lead to other byproducts, if you will. But there's no question that American policing needs to be reset when it comes to use of force. It's a very complicated question. It really starts as a bedrock of who do you recruit, what are the things that you reward within the organization, who are the people that are in the organization. Is very, very complicated, and unfortunately, it's not going to be fixed overnight. But what can be fixed fairly quickly is how the district attorney in LA County deals with excessive force.
And I know, I mean, for some of us, it's also about precedent. Like, how are we going to set a precedent that people cannot go? It doesn't matter if you use too much police force against some people and other. You will also be accountable. And what we want to see is accountability. Somebody's having a comment here about specifically people of color. I ran for office too. I met you in the campaign trail many times. And part of my campaign was about rethinking how the police can utilize a different type of training and a different type of framework that works for people. And that it also works for people of color, where we have a institutionalized racist system that is coming from the slavery, that's coming from the Jim Crow era. So I want also the people that are listening to my live stream to also understand that this is not a black and white issue, that you're not going to come here and save it all and fix it. That is complex. And that it is being rooted in racism. And it's sad that we're in 2020 and we still see this. But the beauty of it is that we can contribute by choosing people that are going to align more with our goals, and the idea that we can make some folks accountable and not just give everybody a free pass just because they have a badge. That has to end. That definitely has to end. I want to ask you another question that I'm not very familiar with, which is somebody asked if you support the expansion of the neighborhood prosecutor program.
The functional neighborhood prosecutor, I do, but again, it's all how you do this, right? If the neighborhood prosecutor is there to work with the community, to collaborate, to find ways to intervene, to find ways to remedy some of the problems in the community and the collaboration, which is my vision, I support it. If the neighborhood prosecutor is there to continue to accentuate the prosecution of poor young people in the community, or to criminalizing the poor, then that is not the function that I would support. Again, a lot of this is not, the position, but it's what do you do with the position? What are the policies? What is the leadership? What are you hoping to get out of this? I think having a strong neighborhood prosecutor program that is working with community groups, that is looking for solutions and problem solving, that is holding environmental polluters in the neighborhood accountable, that is holding perhaps a business that is stealing from the consumer, or landlord that is not holding up their end of the bargain in the way that they maintain a property. Or sometimes, quite frankly, some people that engage in violent activity that need to be addressed. But how that is addressed, I think that is to me, that will be a model of neighborhood prosecutors.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So one question that is coming out also, and I'm also curious because around the unhoused community, back to this topic, was the use of social media for some, for for policemen or for people, for officers, and some of them have partake in some pretty racist and terrible blogs. Again, this is not everyone. I'm not generalizing that all the cops out there are terrible, but some of them have engaged in this type of behavior. What do you think? Are we supporting? Are you supporting monitoring social media for our officers, or what are the guidelines here where the people that are supposed to protect us sometimes engage in these public forums where they're not so kind to other people that don't look or behave like them?
Yeah, actually, look, I mean, I had a pretty horrendous experience in San Francisco as a district attorney when I became aware there was a group of officers that were trading emails and text messages that were extremely racist and homophobic. And one of the concerns that immediately came up for me is that we have an obligation as prosecutors when we file a case to provide the defense with any information that may show a personal bias in a witness, in this case, a police officer. And obviously a police officer that is consistently using language that shows that they're extremely racist in their beliefs has no place in the force, number one, but it compromises the ability to prosecute cases using them as a witness. So I requested the police department provide me information, which they refused originally. We wound up having to dismiss or evaluate over 4,000 cases. It was such a massive undertaking that the police union in San Francisco went out to spend about $500,000 in radio ads against me when I was running for office. There is no question that if you're going to be a police officer, if you're going to be a judge, if you're going to be a prosecutor, you don't get to be a racist and continue to have your job, right? You can be a plumber maybe, and you can pick where are you going to do your plumbing. And I'm no disrespect to plumbers, but my point is there are certain types of work where you are providing a service to the community that is much larger than your own personal beliefs. And if you're harboring such a racist or homophobic beliefs, you don't belong in the police force. You don't belong in the prosecutor's office either, by the way.
Thank you. And I think one of the last questions that I want to ask you, I think I lost you on Instagram, but that's fine. We're coming back as soon as we can, is around the death penalty.
Yes.
And a lot of us are really curious about this question. I am personally opposed to the death penalty. I don't think that's the solution. I know it's very rooted on a lot of ideas and such, and we can dispute that here and our values as a society and as a country. But did you support the death penalty? Is this something that what are your views around this? And also, do you support the safe injection sites? So
I am against the death penalty. I campaigned against the death penalty. In fact, I campaigned to abolish the death penalty in 2012. I never once fought the death penalty as a prosecutor. I have actually not only publicly talked about being against the death penalty, but I have pledged that I would never seek the death penalty if I become elected in LA. But more importantly, we actually put a policy paper and we did a press conference, which is very unprecedented, where I committed to removing as many people as we can from death row from LA County. LA County, by the way, has approximately 230 to 240 people that are currently on death row. And the current DA, by the way, has continued to prosecute and put people on death row. In fact, we put people on death row during her period of time as a DA that many southern states. I know it's shocking, especially since the majority of the voters in LA County have voted against the death penalty. So not only we would not seek the death penalty, but we would also look for ways to get people out of death row. Some of them may stay in prison. Some of them, depending on where they're at, they may get an opportunity to be paroled at some point. That would be not only a commitment that I would make, but that would have a tremendous impact in the way that we spend money in our prison system. I think the death penalty is broken on many levels. Number one is bias in the way that it's implemented, right? We know that, for instance, in this county, out of 22 people that have been put in death row in the last 7 years, 21 were men of color.
Wow.
You know that if you make a mistake, you cannot fix it, right? Once we execute someone, there is no way to bring him back. We know that the system makes a lot of mistakes. Perfect example. I have a very good friend of mine, Frankie Carrillo, who spent almost 20 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. He was literally found innocent, and yet he spent 20 years in prison. And the DA, by the way, the sheriff investigators working the case lie, and the DA hid the evidence, and this young man went as a 16-year-old. He was prosecuted as an adult. He went to adult prison for nearly 20 years. He is not unique, which is what really breaks my heart, right?
That's the part that kills me.
Like this. So with the death penalty, we just can't take those chances. Then also it's economically broken, right? The cost of prosecuting a death penalty case, the cost of incarcerating somebody in death row are so out of proportion. That's money that comes out of even public safety budgets. So the fact is that the death penalty has no place in modern society for many reasons. But even if you want to look at it strictly through a public safety lens, the money that we spend in prosecuting and housing these people is money that has been taken away from budgets to keep the rest of us safe, money that we're taking away from providing victim services, money that we're taking away from providing mental health services. I can go on and on and on. So absolutely, I'm against it. It wouldn't happen if I'm the DA, and it shouldn't happen anywhere.
That's refreshing to hear. And also the governor actually has put a moratorium on the death penalty or people that are on the death penalty road until further notice, I guess. And it's commendable to see that happening. So I appreciate you, you're taking this stand because I have my very views about the death penalty, but I appreciate that you're running and stating that this is something that you're not comfortable with and you're not planning to support. I want to ask you a question around immigration.
Yes.
And the fact that we have secure communities, which is this program from ICE, that collaborates with the local police, so that if I'm an undocumented person and for the people that have been, following me, and for those of you that don't agree with this view, it's okay that we disagree, but we can still, and we must have this conversation, because there are a lot of undocumented folks that live in this country. They pay to our economy, they pay taxes, and they also end up, like I know somebody personally that in a stop sign as a police man for directions, and they follow her, stop her. She didn't have the proper documentation. She ended up in the jail system and in process of deportation because of secure communities, and because she just stopped and asked for an address. She was not committing a crime. She didn't even have a light broken. I mean, it just breaks my heart. And I wanted to ask you, what's your take on the collaboration between ICE on secure communities and the local police force, especially here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, look, I have a long history of being very outspoken about the need to separate local law enforcement from immigration enforcement. There are many operational reasons why this is important, but there's also a lot of moral reasons. When the local police and local prosecutors engage in cooperation with immigration authorities, they drive a wedge between the immigrant community, not only those that are documented, but the entire community, in public safety. And that generally creates insecurity. That generally actually leads to more crime. It creates a vacuum where victims are afraid to report when they're being victimized. Domestic violence victims won't come forward, so they continue to get abused. People get extorted. People get victimized in so many ways, but they will never come to the authorities because they're afraid that that may lead to their deportation or someone else's deportation.
Yeah.
When I was in Arizona, I was engaged in an epic battle with Joe Arpaio, who was a sheriff there, and he dubbed himself as America's toughest sheriff, and he made his name on going after Latinos, not just immigrants, but Latinos in general, and his immigration enforcement raids. I went to Congress to testify against him. I had received death threats because of my activity pushing back. As a district attorney in San Francisco, not only was I very clear that we would not cooperate with the immigration authorities, but we even made it so that we would create a safe passage for people that were coming, either witnesses or victims that were coming to the courthouse, make sure they were not going to get picked up by ICE when they were in our courtrooms. I think it's fundamentally critical that local law enforcement decouples itself from immigration enforcement for the well-being of the community. I think just as importantly, the fact is that we see a very clear racist tendency in the way that we enforce immigration. Look, when I was in Arizona and when I was in Arizona, there were a lot of Canadians in the city that I policed. Many were there illegally. They had overstayed their visas, but Canadians were not being stopped by the sheriff department and asked for their papers. But we had U.S. citizens that were brown-skinned that were getting stopped all the time, and they had to show that they were lawfully here. Mm-hmm. The point is that just there's no place in local authorities to engage in immigration business. I have been very clear about this and will continue to do so if I were to be elected as district attorney here. And I have to tell you also one other point. The DA plays a major role in this. The DA actually, the way that they file cases, the plea bargainings that they allow to occur, or whether they are even willing sometimes to re-sentence someone or not, can have a tremendous impact on whether someone is going to be deported. I'll give you a perfect example. This happens in our courtrooms every day. Somebody gets stopped for the first time driving under the influence, low-level alcohol level, no injuries, no crime other than they were under the influence. Very typically, the DA has a whole broad spectrum of things that they can do with the case. They can plead the case to reckless driving while drinking, or they can take the case as a DUI. The difference between the two, one, the DUI will cause somebody to be deported. A reckless while drinking won't. The consequences as far as the criminal justice system are the same. This person's still going to have the same insurance consequences. They're going to have the points in their license, all that other stuff. The only difference is one person could be deported and the other one not, depending on how this happens. In this district attorney's office, you have deputy DAs regularly pushing pleas that they know that will not be immigration safe, even when they have an alternative to do something that would be better, often causing families to be broken up unnecessarily.
This blows my mind and it boils my skin because I think it's such an injustice, and at the national level we see it with our current president instigating hate against immigrants of color, black and brown immigrants, not other immigrants, clearly. It's the top of the hour. I know that I invited you for a half hour and we have been talking for over an hour now.
Quiero primero que nada, ¿puedo hablar en español un momento?
Por favor, sí.
Ok, porque yo creo que es muy importante también. Yo sé que la mayoría de la gente que nos están oyendo probablemente no entienden español, pero para aquellos que entienden español, yo creo que es muy importante que ustedes sepan de que, número uno, yo hablo español y tengo mis antecedentes son muy parecidos a muchos de ustedes, y quiero que sepan que si yo fuera electo, mi oficina va a tener un gran compromiso para poder proteger a nuestra comunidad, a la comunidad de inmigrantes, como vamos a proteger a todas las comunidades, la comunidad afroamericana, las comunidades afluentes también. Pero es importante que ustedes sepan que yo estoy comprometido a que todas las comunidades se traten igual, con respeto, y que hablemos el idioma que ustedes entienden. Inclusive no hablo chino o coreano, pero vamos a asegurarnos de que podemos tener también capacidad para trabajar en esos lenguajes y cualquier otro lenguaje que se hable en el condado y en el cual nosotros necesitamos proveer el servicio de nuestra oficina.
George, gracias por decir eso, porque para nosotros los latinos, yo soy inmigrante, yo misma, o sea, yo no nací en este país, y para la comunidad inmigrante, por ejemplo, en mi distrito donde yo vivo, son 60% de la comunidad son inmigrantes que han sufrido muchísimo por medio de esta pandemia, porque si sufren, por ejemplo, de violencia doméstica. El otro asunto que está pasando es que la economía de nosotros inmigrantes no es la misma donde nos podemos quedar trabajando en casa.
Claro.
Nosotros tenemos que tomar el bus, tenemos que salir a trabajar. No es igual. Yo aprecio muchísimo que tú puedas hablar en nuestra misma lengua y que nos entiendas culturalmente, porque al final del día somos la mayoría, incluso en Los Ángeles, y es importante reconocer que la representación es importante también.
Desde luego.
Entonces te agradezco muchísimo por haber venido y acompañarnos. Thank you so much. For those of you that stay with me this whole full hour and 10 minutes, thank you so much for sticking up. This race is so important, friends. I mean, we learn what the DA does. We learn a little bit about who George is and why he's running and his vision for Los Angeles. Don't take this lightly. Vote for change and vote wisely. I often talk about this. And in November, we have an opportunity to choose someone that is going to align more with our goals. And this is not going to happen by itself. I can tell you that as a candidate myself, we need everyone, because to change everything, we need everyone. So if you resonated with what George said, please go to his website, follow him, volunteer. You know, we're in a time of a pandemic, so this is going to be very interesting for us to campaign this way. If you have extra, please donate, because campaigning is expensive. And reaching and getting your message across to everyone that can vote for you is crucial. And Los Angeles deserves someone that is going to stand up for us and that is going to be in our corner. And I think George is that person. So I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to speaking to us and to educating us. I saw a lot of movement around there. And for those of you that miss it, go to my YouTube channel. You can watch it again, send more questions. And thank you so much, George. Any last thoughts or any last words before we go?
Yes, under this horrendous, pandemic that we're experiencing, I want to make sure that everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy, maintain social distance, protect yourself, protect your family, protect your neighbors. I know that often we think, well, I'm young, this is not going to happen to me. It's only something that happens to the elderly. But the reality is we've seen the contrary. We've seen people of all age groups dying. Certainly we see men and women of color being more heavily impacted and the poor. So until there's a vaccine, and that's still about a year plus away, please, follow the CDC recommendations. Wear a mask when you're in public. Keep distance. Protect your family. Protect other members of the community. Para los que hablan español, por favor, durante esta pandemia, vamos a protegernos, vamos a proteger la comunidad, vamos a proteger la familia, vamos a mantener la distancia que necesitamos, vamos a utilizar máscara cuando estamos en público. Es importante que reconozcamos que, sobre todo, nuestra comunidad está siendo más impactada que otras, y que la única manera que nosotros podemos protegernos es siguiendo la distancia que necesitamos, utilizando máscara, lavando las manos, haciendo todas las cosas que van a protegernos a nosotros, a nuestra familia, a nuestra comunidad. I want to thank everybody. Stay healthy, stay strong, stay safe. Vote in November. Every single voter will get a ballot.
Matters.
But guess what? If you don't punch that ballot and if you don't send it out, it doesn't count. So thank you so much. And if you want to go to my website, georgegascon.org, it's just my name.org. It's very, very straightforward. En español pueden entrar en mi sitio, simplemente es mi nombre, georgegascon.org. y pueden traducirlo en español todo o en cualquier lenguaje. Pueden usar Google Translate y lo pueden traducir todo. Gracias. Thank you so much.
Thank you, George. And for those of you that are voting, I want to see all the hearts and the comments right now. Just pledge right now that you're going to send your ballot and you're going to mail it and you're going to take a vote. And for those of you that resonated with this message, follow George, support his work, make some phone calls, donate, share this video with somebody that needs to see it. Share it on your profile so other people can also get educated and we can all come out of this pandemic better, way better than we came in. George, buenas noches. Gracias mil. Hablamos muy pronto. Thank you so much.
Gracias.
And we'll talk very soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye, everybody.